In the previous video we examined Matthew 24 verses 1 to 10 and 23 to 26. So let us continue our examination of Matthew 24. Let us try to separate which verses apply to the destruction of Jerusalem in the first century and which verses apply to the end time ahead of us. Let us have these questions in mind now as we read verses 11 to 14. Many false prophets will arise and mislead many. And because of the increasing of lawlessness, the love of the greater number will grow cold. But the one who has endured to the end will be saved. And this good news of the kingdom will be preached in all the inhabited earth for a witness to all the nations. And then the end will come. These verses apply primarily to our future. So we should expect increased lawlessness. This will result in more hate and suspiciousness among people. Because Jesus foretold that the love of the greater number will grow cold. Many are already frustrated by the lawlessness around us. But we should not expect that governments will be able to change that for the better. Instead, we should prepare ourselves to endure to the end. Despite persecution and suppression of faith in Jesus Christ, the good news of the kingdom will be preached in all countries. How will this be possible? Surely the news media will indirectly further this by reporting about persecuted Christians. There will also be the two special witnesses foretold in Revelation 11. Their activity will not go unnoticed, because they will be invincible for 3.5 years. They will have miraculous powers like prophets in the past. But the next verses in Matthew 24 apply to Jerusalem's destruction in the first century. In verses 15 to 20 Jesus says, "Therefore, when you catch sight of the disgusting thing that causes desolation, as spoken about by Daniel the prophet, standing in a holy place, let the reader use discernment. Then let those in Judea begin fleeing to the mountains. Let the man on the housetop not come down to take the goods out of his house, and let the man in the field not return to pick up his outer garment. Woe to the pregnant women and those nursing a baby in those days. Keep praying that your flight may not occur in wintertime nor on the Sabbath day." Here Jesus refers to the prophecy in Daniel. It is at the end of chapter 9. It is in the same chapter where we have the prophecy about 70 weeks and about Jesus Christ's first coming and his sacrificial death in the middle of the last yearly week. But what about the next verse? Verse 21. Does it apply to the first century or is it about our future? Let us read verses 21 and 22. "For then there will be great tribulation such as has not occurred since the world's beginning until now. No, nor will occur again. In fact, unless those days were cut short, no flesh would be saved. But on account of the chosen ones those days will be cut short." This hardly applies to the hardships in Judea when the Romans came and destroyed the Jewish system. The hardships the Jews experienced were similar to when Jerusalem was destroyed the first time by the Babylonians. To the contrary, Jesus said, "For then there will be great tribulation such as has not occurred since the world's beginning." It is hard to claim that the tribulation at the destruction of Jerusalem and Judea by the Romans was worse than anything since the world's beginning. Therefore, the Great Tribulation mentioned by Jesus should be about a future worldwide Great Tribulation. The end of Daniel 11 and beginning of Daniel 12 also speak of this Great Tribulation, initiated by the king of the north when he will go out in a great rage to annihilate and to devote many to destruction. This tribulation will be very severe, because Jesus said, "In fact, unless those days were cut short, no flesh would be saved." I can imagine that such a dangerous situation is only possible if it involves nuclear weapons. Then the world could be on the brink of total nuclear war. At that time many will claim to be Jesus Christ. But Jesus warns about them and tells that he will not be secretly anywhere on earth. Instead, his arrival will be visible in the sky. This will happen after the greatest and most dangerous tribulation. But right after that the sun will be darkened and Jesus' arrival and presence will be like a lighting on the sky. That is what Jesus says in verses 27 to 31. "For just as the lightning comes out of the east and shines over to the west, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. Wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together." Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth will beat themselves in grief, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a great trumpet sound, and they will gather his chosen ones together from the four winds, from one extremity of the heavens to their other extremity. Here we see that the Great Tribulation is not the darkening of the sun or the shaking of the heavens, because Jesus said this will happen after the tribulation. Though this also will be scary, but this is not any more the Great Tribulation that needs to be shortened for the sake of the chosen ones. After that, in verses 36 to 42, Jesus compares his arrival and presence in the sky to the day the flood came. People did not expect it to happen that day. Likewise, on that day when Jesus' chosen ones are taken to heaven, Christians will be surprised. It will be so sudden that nobody will be able to say in advance which day that will happen. Jesus then explains in verses 40 to 42 about Christians who expect to be taken to heaven. Then 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken along and the other abandoned. 2 women will be grinding at the hand mill. One will be taken along and the other abandoned. Keep on the watch therefore, because you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. These verses are evidently about anointed Christians who expect to be taken to heaven. So this is not about Armageddon or the great crowd mentioned in Revelation 7. Here Jesus urges his chosen ones to keep on the watch and be ready to be taken to heaven. He once again repeats the importance of this in verses 43 and 44. There he says, "But know one thing. If the householder had known in what watch the thief was coming, he would have kept awake and not allowed his house to be broken into. On this account, you too prove yourselves ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not think to be it." These verses are not directly related to Armageddon or Gog's attack in Ezekiel 38. Instead, Matthew 24 is primarily for anointed Christians who expect to be taken to heaven. After that, in verse 45, Jesus rhetorically asks, who really is the faithful and discreet slave whom his master appointed over his domestics, to give them their food at the proper time? Every anointed Christian should ask, am I a faithful and discreet slave of Jesus, and am I building faith and helping people to understand God's word? If we take out of context this verse, we could think that it applies to a single faithful and discreet slave. But it does not seem so, because in the next chapter Jesus speaks about 2 good and faithful slaves and about 1 wicked and sluggish slave. And Daniel 11:33 also says, "And those having insight among the people will impart understanding to the many." So, it doesn't seem true that a single one of Jesus' slaves would be able to impart understanding to all who want to understand God's word. Neither does it seem true that a single group, like the Apostles of the Mormons or the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, would be the only ones giving timely understanding of God's word. To those who are currently leading Christian congregations or organizations, Jesus has some serious warnings in verses 48 to 51. He says, "But if ever that evil slave says in his heart, 'My master is delaying,' and he starts to beat his fellow slaves and to eat and drink with the confirmed drunkards, the master of that slave will come on a day that he does not expect and in an hour that he does not know, and he will punish him with the greatest severity and will assign him his place with the hypocrites. There is where his weeping and the gnashing of his teeth will be." Unfortunately, many leaders of Christian congregations and organizations harshly treat any individual Christians who don't agree with them on doctrinal matters. These leaders often tyrannically require total obedience to their false Bible interpretations. Isn't that what Jesus meant when he said, "He starts to beat his fellow slaves"? That was something about Matthew 24. I hope you found it interesting, and if you want more interesting explanations of the Bible, check out my other videos on this channel.